Darkness presses against the cane fields. The air is heavy with smoke, sweet and choking. From somewhere far off, drums beat, slow at first, then quickening like a racing heart. A woman's scream slices the night, but it ends too suddenly, swallowed by silence. St. Mary Parish, Jamaica. Easter morning, 1760. 3:45 a.m. A wooden door groans open. Bare feet slap the ground, splash through warm blood pooling on the dirt floor. The smell of iron and fire mixes in the wind. A whisper curls through the dark. By the time the sun rose, 60 bodies lay silent. Chains had broken. And a name, one name, would be whispered in terror and reverence: Tacky. Morning heat rises before the sun itself crests the horizon. The cane fields stretch like an ocean, stalks whispering as the wind passes through. Each movement in the rows is marked by the clink of chains, the grunt of bodies driven past exhaustion. The sweet smell of crushed cane mingles with sweat and rot, and in the distance a barrel of rum cracks open, spilling into dirt like wasted blood. Inside the counting house, a candle gutters even in daylight. Samuel Briggs sits hunched at a desk. His hair, once golden, has faded to a thin gray, slicked with sweat. His fingers twitch around a quill, blotting ink on the ledger. A flask sits open at his elbow. He mutters as he scratches down the numbers. Keep the books clean, that's all. Clean. They don't care about screams, only figures. Pounds of sugar, gallons of rum. Heads counted like cattle. Clean books, Briggs, clean. The sound of the whip cracks outside, sharp as thunder. Briggs flinches, knocks the flask, and rum drips across the page. He stares at the spreading stain before lifting the bottle and swallowing deep. Not far away, in a shaded corner of the estate, a young woman bends over paper. Mary Ellen Hart, daughter of the missionary, dips her pen quickly, nervously, as if the act itself is forbidden. Her dress is plain, sleeves rolled up, a strand of hair constantly falling across her face. She whispers the words as she writes them. They beat him until he could no longer stand. And still they cursed him for weakness. I fear these fields are watered not with rain, but with blood. Her hand pauses. A drop of ink smears the edge of the letter. She blows on the page, glances over her shoulder. From beyond the wall, men cry out in the fields. The overseer's voice booms, thick with rum. Faster, you dogs. Faster, or I'll make chains sing on your backs. Chains rattle, whips snap, voices fall silent. Mary Ellen presses her hand against the paper as though to steady herself. If Father knew what I wrote, he would burn these pages. But I cannot let the silence be the only witness. The wind carries a low murmur through the fields. Words not in English. Soft secret. The workers whisper to one another, eyes cast downward, but the tone is urgent, defiant. Briggs hears it when he stumbles from the counting house. He narrows his eyes, drunk and uneasy, whispers, always whispers. He spits into the dust. The chains keep them quiet enough, but he knows, as Mary Ellen does, that chains do not bind the tongue of memory. The plantation is ripe with fear, not only of the lash, but of what silence might be hiding. And in that silence, seeds of fire are already taking root. The memory does not begin in chains. It begins with the sea wind on a cliff in Fantilands, the sound of drums calling children home at dusk. Tacky, still a boy then, balanced on the edge of stone, a red feather tucked into his waistband. His father had given it to him, saying, "When you wear this, you remember who you are." Feather for the bird that cannot be caged. Kojo scrambled up beside him, breathless, laughing too loudly. He always laughed. He carried a half-carved flute in his hands, its surface rough but already singing when he blew across the hole. "You'll fall one day, Tacky," Kojo teased. "And the sea will claim you, feather and all." Tacky only smiled, eyes on the horizon. "If I fall, Kojo, you'll jump after me." Behind them, a younger girl's voice rose in song. Ima's voice was soft but sure, weaving an old lullaby their mother had taught her. She clutched a silver pendant at her throat. Their mother scolded them for staying out too late, but her eyes softened when Amma sang. Those were the days before Iron Night, the raid. Fires in the village, shadows with muskets, men screaming in languages the children did not know. Taki woke to his father shouting, grabbing a blade that glinted red in the firelight. Kojo pulled Ama into the bush, covering her mouth as the soldiers stormed the huts. The smell of smoke, of blood, of terror, too sharp to ever forget. Dragged in chains, the three were shoved together with others, marched toward the coast. Ama clutched her pendant until her fingers bled. On the beach, the ocean foamed cruelly white. Ships loomed against the sky like monsters. The air smelled of tar and salt. Taki's father was beaten when he tried to shield his son from the sailor's whip. The sound of the lash cracked, the man's body fell, and Taki's eyes locked on his father's for the last time. He did not cry. He pressed the red feather against his chest. The ship was a coffin of wood and iron. Chains bit into ankles. The stench of rot and sickness filled every breath. Men coughed until they no longer moved. Children whimpered until no sound came. Kojo tried to play his unfinished flute with bound hands. The sound was thin, broken, but still laughter flickered in his eyes when he said, "Even chains cannot choke music." Ama whispered lullabies to the women around her, voice shaking but sweet. "Sleep, child, sleep," she sang, though no sleep was kind. Her silver pendant glimmered faintly in the dark hold, a reminder that someone once called her daughter. Taki said little. His silence was not weakness but steel. His eyes held fire. He watched the sailors above, counted the steps they took, memorized their patterns. One night, as rain lashed the deck above, Ama shivered. "Brother, will we ever go home?" Taki held the feather against his ribs. "Home is not a place, Ama. Home is memory. As long as we remember, they have not taken everything," Kojo whispered through cracked lips. "And when we are free, I will finish this flute. I will make it sing across mountains." The ship rocked violently. A man chained near them cried out in another tongue. The guards came down with torches, beating him until the light dimmed from his eyes. Blood ran across the floorboards and pooled around Taki's fatherless feet. Taki did not blink. He watched, he remembered, and the fire in him deepened. Years later, on the plantations of Jamaica, the three carried their fragments of memory like weapons. Taki tucked the red feather deep into his waistband. It was faded now, fragile, but still a symbol of freedom. He worked in silence, eyes always scanning. Kojo carved flutes from scraps of wood, playing them in secret when overseers slept. His laughter returned in bursts, mocking chains, reminding others that joy was a rebellion of its own. Ama sang lullabies to children torn from their mothers. Her voice softened fear, even when the whip cracked. The silver pendant lay cool against her throat, a secret touchstone when she sang. The overseers saw only tools for labor. They never noticed the feather, the flute, the pendant. They did not understand that memory, small, fragile, stubborn, was dangerous. One night, Ama asked softly, "Brother, do you still see Father's face?" Taki nodded, eyes burning. "I see it every time they raise the whip. And one day, Ama, they will see ours." Chains first bound their bodies, then their memories. But memory finds a way to sing. The nights on the plantation held two faces. One belonged to the overseers, darkness broken by torches, patrols with dogs, the smell of whiskey on their breath. The other belonged to the enslaved. Whispers carried on the wind, songs that disguised messages, rituals hidden in the cane fields where moonlight could not betray them. It was under that second night that Nana Abina walked. She was old, her back bent but her eyes unbroken. Her hands smelled of ash and earth, for she always carried her calabash gourd filled with grey dust. She told the young that the ashes came from fires in their homeland, fires that still burned in spirit, though the ocean lay between. Kojo sat beside her one evening, his carved flute resting across his knees. He whispered, "If they catch us here, they'll whip us raw." Abina's smile was faint, almost invisible in the shadows. "Child, they already whip you, but they cannot reach your spirit unless you hand it to them." Kojo frowned. "Spirit cannot break chains. Spirit is what bends chains until they snap." She sprinkled a pinch of ash into his palm. "Keep this. It is memory. When you forget who you are, touch it, and you will remember." Kojo clenched the ashes in his fist, eyes suddenly bright. Amma's nights were different. She worked in the great house, carrying trays and scrubbing floors. The air there smelled of candle wax and rum, and it was there she met Joseph, a field hand who had learned letters from an old Bible left behind by a dead preacher. He taught her words, how to write them in secret. She began writing letters, letters never sent, letters that spoke of pain, of longing, of a dream of freedom. Joseph would pass her scraps of paper, and she would scribble when no one watched. One evening, Joseph whispered, "Your voice already carries in song. Let your words carry too." Amma smiled, silver pendant glinting faintly in the firelight. "If I write, maybe one day someone will read and know we were more than chains." But the walls had ears. Thomas Calhoun was the overseer, a tall man with skin sunburnt to red leather and a bottle always near his lips. His eyes were pale, cold and restless. He tapped his riding crop against his boot when he walked, a rhythm that made men flinch before he even raised it. He had a taste for whiskey and for catching secrets. Calhoun noticed the way Amma lingered near Joseph. He saw Kojo walking with Abina at night. He smelled the smoke of small fires, the ones meant for ritual, not work. One evening, he called Briggs to the counting house, his voice slurred but sharp. "I see them whispering. I see them passing things in the dark. You keep your books clean, Briggs, but I'll keep the field clean." He slammed the crop on the table. "One spark in dry cane burns the whole island." Briggs shifted uneasily, muttering, "Aye, perhaps. But sometimes a man whispers only to remember he's human." Calhoun's eyes narrowed. "Human? They're tools, Briggs. Tools don't whisper. Tools don't scheme. And if they do, I break them." Back in the quarters, Kojo clutched his flute. He told Taki, "Abena says spirit bends chains. But if Calhoun learns," Taki interrupted, voice low, steady, "let him learn. He can break our backs, but not our memory." "Not yet," Amma added softly. "Then we must be careful. Joseph says letters are dangerous. If Calhoun sees..." Kojo's laughter flickered like a flame. "Then hide them better. Let the overseer drink himself blind. He will not see what spirit hides." Amma lowered her gaze, her hand brushing the pendant. "Spirit will not protect us from the lash." Abena's voice rose from the shadows, firm as stone. "No, but spirit will teach you when to rise." The fire in their circle burned low. Chains rattled in the distance as guards paced. But under the hum of insects and the weight of heat, the whispers continued. Hope and cruelty walked the same ground, side by side. One carried a bottle and a crop. The other carried ashes, a flute and a lullaby, and though Calhoun watched, always watched, he did not yet understand. Whispers are not silence. They are seeds waiting for fire. The midday sun pressed down like a furnace. Cane fields shimmered, stalks bending beneath the heat. Workers dragged themselves through the rows, sweat stinging their eyes. Somewhere, a whip cracked sharp as lightning. At the edge of the great house yard, a boy no older than 12 stood trembling. His hands were bound, a crust of bread clutched between his fingers. His ribs jutted from his skin, hunger carved deep. Thomas Calhoun swayed with his bottle in hand, pale eyes fixed on the boy. His riding crop tapped against his boot in rhythm. "Bread," he sneered, "belongs to men who earn it, not to rats that steal." A crowd gathered in silence. Chains rattled softly as the workers edged closer. Kojo muttered under his breath, "He's only a child." Amma's fingers dug into her silver pendant. "They'll kill him," she whispered, her voice trembling. Taki stood rigid, his jaw clenched. His hand brushed against the hidden red feather at his waist. Calhoun lifted his voice so all could hear. "This is what happens when one of you thinks yourselves men instead of beasts." He drew his pistol, the barrel glinting in the sun. The boy sobbed, tried to speak, but no sound came. Amma broke, her voice cutting through the silence. "He was just a child." Calhoun's eyes snapped toward her. He smiled, thin and cruel, then pulled the trigger. The sound shattered the still air. The boy collapsed, bread scattering in the dust, red soaking into the earth beneath him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some turned away. Others froze, their faces masks of stone. Kojo trembled, fists clenching around the wooden flute hidden in his pocket. Ama covered her mouth, tears streaking down her cheeks. Tacky's voice came quiet, low, but it carried. Then let them learn what children we once were. His eyes burned as he looked at the lifeless boy. And what men we are now. The words hung in the heat, heavier than the smoke that drifted from Calhoun's pistol. Kojo whispered, almost afraid of the sound of his own voice. "Did you mean it?" Tacky turned, his face hard as stone. "I meant every word." Calhoun barked at the guards to drag the body away. He raised his bottle, drank deep, then spat on the ground. "Remember this, all of you. Thieves die. There'll be no mercy in my fields." But the silence that followed was not fear, it was memory. The kind that burrowed deep and refused to fade. Miles away, in Spanish Town, Governor Edward Pauncefort dipped his quill in ink. His wig sat perfectly powdered, his desk stacked with reports. He spoke without looking at his secretary. "Another disturbance?" The man nodded, reading aloud from a paper. "Yes, sir. A boy shot for stealing bread. Witnesses. Unrest in the fields. Whispers of disobedience." Pauncefort waved a hand dismissively. "Whispers are wind. Jamaica bleeds sugar and rum into London's coffers. A dead boy changes nothing, but sir, spare me. If it grows into rebellion, we'll crush it. If it festers quietly, it's no more than an inconvenience." He signed his name with a flourish, sealing indifference into law. Back on the estate, rumors spread faster than fire in Cane. The boy's death was spoken of in hushed tones, retold in work songs, carried in lullabies. "He was just a child," some whispered, "and still they killed him," others answered. The bread that fell into dust became a symbol, proof that hunger could cost a life, and proof that life was already worth less than bread. The whispers sharpened into resolve. Tacky's words repeated from lip to lip until they no longer belonged to him, but to everyone who remembered. Something had cracked, and once cracked, it could not be mended. The moon rose pale above the cane fields, its light silvering the rose. The overseers had retired, bottles of rum clutched in their hands, their snores rumbling through the night. The fields, for a few precious hours, belonged not to masters, but to memory. A circle formed in the shadows. At its center, Nana Abena held her gourd of ashes. She sprinkled them into a clay bowl filled with water. The liquid turned gray, dark as smoke. "Drink," she whispered, "and remember." Tacky took the first sip. The taste was bitter like earth and fire, but he swallowed it whole. Kojo followed, making a face. "Ashes taste worse than chains." Abena smiled faintly. "Good, then you will not forget." Ama's voice rose softly, singing the lullaby their mother had taught them. The song wound through the circle, binding them together. Even the cicadas seemed to hush. From the edge of the firelight stepped Mensa, the blacksmith. His hands were scarred, smelling of iron and smoke. He laid down a bundle of machetes wrapped in cloth. "They will say, 'These are for cutting cane,'" he murmured. "But cane has never bled like the men who whipped us." Tacky unwrapped one, running his thumb along the blade's edge. "Good steel," he said simply. Mensa's eyes gleamed. "Steel that remembers its master." Later, by the kitchen fires, Grace slipped between shadows. She carried folded scraps of paper hidden in her apron. She passed them to Ama, who tucked them beneath a loose floorboard. "These letters," Grace whispered, "tell of men willing to rise. From the mountains, from the other estates. They wait for the signal." Ama nodded, clutching her pendant. "And what if the letters are found?" Grace gave a grim smile. "Then I burn before I speak." But footsteps echoed suddenly in the hall. Grace froze, the papers still half exposed. Mary Ellen Hart appeared, candle in hand, her eyes curious. "What are you doing here at this hour?" she asked softly. Ama's heart pounded. Grace dipped her head quickly. "Kitchen scraps, miss." "Rats have been at them again." She shuffled away, clutching her apron. Mary Ellen lingered, eyes narrowing at the floorboard. She said nothing, but the candlelight flickered across her face, uncertain. On another night, deep in the smithy, Mensa's hammer rang too loudly. Sparks flew as he shaped another blade. Tacky and Kojo kept watch by the door, the sound of boots on gravel. Calhoun's voice slurred with drink. "What's this? Fire so late?" Mensa shoved the glowing blade beneath a pile of ash, his hands blistering from the heat. Tacky stepped forward quickly. "Sharpening cane knives, sir." Dawn comes fast, and the stalks are thick this season. Calhoun squinted, eyes narrowing. He sniffed the air. Smells like iron and secrets. He swayed on his feet, lifted his bottle, and drank deep. Finally, with a muttered curse, he staggered away. When the door closed, Kojo let out a long breath. "If we fail," Taki cut him off, voice low and fierce, "then history will not remember our names. That is failure enough." The silence that followed was not fear, but agreement. Days blurred into nights. The conspirators grew in number. Each one swore over Abena's ashes. Each one carried a hidden blade or whispered message. Then came John Wallace, the Scottish indentured servant. His back bore scars from lashes, meant to remind him that his poverty still chained him, though not in the same way. He smoked a clay pipe, his voice thick with bitterness. "You think you alone suffer," he spat. "I came here chasing wages. Instead, they work me like a dog and pay me with scraps. Your fight is mine, too." Taki studied him with wary eyes. "You say their whip is cruel, but will you raise a blade against them?" Wallace's lips curled. "Aye, let them taste the fire they poured on us all." Kojo laughed softly. "Then drink the ashes and prove your word." Wallace grimaced at the bitter taste, but swallowed. "Now I'm bound same as you." By day the fields burned under the sun. Overseers barked, chains rattled, and rum barrels rolled to the storehouse. By night, the air itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. Amma whispered lullabies to the children, but her voice carried messages hidden within. Mensa hid blades in cane bundles. Grace smuggled more letters, threading the web of rebellion wider each night. Even Mary Ellen, scribbling by candlelight, felt the weight of something rising. Though she could not yet name it, in the shadows of the cane, whispers grew sharper, steadier, until they were no longer whispers, but promises. The fire was waiting St. Mary Parish. Easter morning, 1760. The air was thick with salt and smoke before dawn. The drums began first, low, steady, pulsing like a second heartbeat. Then the whisper of machetes leaving their sheaths. Chains snapped, locks shattered. The sugar fields stirred like restless waves in the dark. Amma's lullaby floated, soft and strange, carrying over the cane. "Sleep, little one, sleep. The night will keep you." But the night did not keep. It opened its jaws. Taki led the first charge. Bare feet hit the earth like thunder. His red feather charm swung at his waist as he raised the machete. Kojo's laugh, wild, sharp, cut through the dawn. "Wake them! Wake them all!" The first overseer staggered from his cabin, blinking at the sound. He had no time to speak. Mensa's blade fell. The sound was wet, final. Cane stalks snapped under running feet. Blood soaked their edges. The smell of iron and sugar mingled, bitter and sweet. In the bookkeeper's quarters, Samuel Briggs jerked awake. He reached for his rum, spilling half of it on his papers. Outside, screams tore the night apart. He pressed his back against the door, whispering to himself, "Keep the books clean, keep the books clean." His hands shook too much to write. At the mission house, Mary Ellen clutched her bundle of letters. The candle shook in her hand as shadows leapt against the walls. She heard the lullaby, faint through the night, followed by steel against bone. Her breath caught. "God help us," she whispered. She ran barefoot into the cane, letters pressed against her chest. The great house doors burst open. Calhoun staggered out, whiskey bottle still in hand. His shirt hung loose, his eyes bleary. He saw the flames licking at the cane fields, the rebels advancing like shadows. "No," he muttered. "No, not me!" Kojo lunged first, blade flashing. Calhoun stumbled back, dropped the bottle. His knees hit the dirt. "Mercy," he gasped. "Mercy, I beg you." Taki stepped forward, voice low, steady, colder than the steel in his hand. "Mercy died with the child you hanged. The machete fell." Calhoun's body folded into the dust. Amma, her pendant glinting in the firelight, seized a torch from the kitchen hearth. Her eyes blazed with a fury that outshone the flames. "This house," she whispered, "held our chains." She flung the torch high. Curtains caught first, then portraits, then the rafters. The great house bloomed into fire. Glass shattered as windows burst, smoke choking the air. Inside, Governor Paunceford's papers curled and blackened. Treaties, inventories, ledgers, all ash now. Grace dragged another torch through the cane, setting the fields alight. She sang as she ran, her voice hoarse but triumphant. Burn the sugar, burn their wealth. Mensa roared, swinging his hammer against the storehouse lock. Barrels of rum tumbled out. He smashed one open. The sweet, heavy scent of liquor mingled with the smoke. He dipped his blade into it, set it aflame, and laughed as the fire ran wild. The rebels surged forward, but in the shadows another figure moved differently. John Wallace, pipe clenched between his teeth, eyes scanning not the fire, but the road beyond. He slipped away past the chaos, toward the militia outpost. His voice thick with false urgency. They're rising. Armed hundreds of them. If you don't act now, the island burns. His betrayal spread faster than the flames. Dawn broke red. The horizon glowed with fire, smoke twisting skyward like black banners. The sugar fields hissed and popped, Kane bending under the weight of blood and ash. Taki stood at the front, chest heaving, blade dripping. Kojo at his side, Amma behind, her face streaked with soot. Their circle had grown. Men, women, children holding tools turned into weapons. For one moment it seemed the island itself bowed to them. Then came the sound, hooves, muskets cocking. Drums not their own, the militia descended. Wallace at their front, pointing his hand like a spear. There is your Taki! Gunfire cracked the dawn. Men fell, women screamed. The rebels surged forward again, but bullets tore holes where laughter had been. Kojo staggered, clutching his side. Blood spilled hot against his carved flute. He dropped it, and the music of his life ended with it. Kojo! Taki cried, but the roar of muskets drowned him. Amma dragged children behind burning Kane, shielding them with her body. Smoke choked her lullaby into silence. Mensa swung his flaming hammer until a shot pierced his chest. He fell onto the fire he made, vanishing in sparks. Grace tried to run, letters still hidden in her apron, but Wallace's voice rang out. Take her! Rough hands seized her, dragging her screaming into the dirt. Taki fought like memory itself, each strike recalling his father's death, each step carrying the weight of chains. Blood slicked the ground beneath him, his charm stained black and red, but the circle was closing. Militia pressed in, fire behind, guns ahead. Pauncefort soldiers, stiff in their coats, raised muskets with bureaucratic precision. To them it was not rebellion. It was paperwork. One shouted, aim. Another, fire. Smoke burst again. The field filled with silence, broken only by the hiss of burning cane. By the time the sun stood fully above the horizon, 60 bodies lay in the ash. The great house was a skeleton of flame. The sugar fields bled with red morning dew. Samuel Briggs stumbled from his hiding place, clutching his ledger to his chest. Mary Ellen, barefoot and ash-streaked, ran toward the harbor, letters pressed like scripture against her heart. Wallace stood among the soldiers, his face grim but satisfied. He had traded names for breath. Taki still stood, though barely. His blade was dull, his charm torn. He stared at the militia captain, chest rising and falling. He did not run. He did not beg. The fire behind him roared, and the chains at his feet smoldered in the ash. The rebellion was fierce, but it was doomed. The fires smoldered for days. Smoke curled above St. Mary Parish like a black crown, visible from miles along the coast. The rebellion had been crushed, but the island itself seemed unwilling to breathe freely again. In the ruins of the great house, women wept over ashes. A widow clutched a scorched locket, the portrait of her husband warped by heat. She stared at the broken walls and asked no one in particular, what kind of creatures do this? Militia scribes walked among the dead, tallying bodies in neat columns. 30 whites, one muttered, 30 servants and the rest. He paused, gesturing at the rebels' corpses. They are not counted. A planter's widow, pale and rigid, pressed a lace handkerchief to her face. My husband built this fortune, she whispered, and in one night, ruined. But some whispered back that fortune had been built on blood already. Briggs shuffled through the wreckage, ledgers clutched under his arm. His eyes darted at every sound, but his mouth muttered the same refrain, keep the books clean. Keep the books clean. The ink on his pages was smudged with rum and ash. Governor Edward Pauncefort stood at Spanish Town, coat immaculate despite the stifling heat. He read reports aloud to his council, voice flat as parchment. Order must be restored. Martial law declared. Patrols doubled. Any slave found with weapons is to be executed without trial. A younger officer hesitated. Sir, their numbers... Pauncefort silenced him with a glance. This is no war. It is an inconvenience. Sugar must flow. Ships must sail. He signed the decree with a flourish. Quills scratched. Wax seals hardened. Men bowed and dispersed. Outside, the militia paraded prisoners through the streets. Shackled, beaten, their wounds still open, they staggered while drums beat a slow, heavy rhythm. Children watched wide-eyed, mothers covered their mouths, and merchants muttered prayers that the trade would not falter. John Wallace walked behind Pauncefort, rewarded with silver coins and rum. His eyes never met those of the prisoners. Night fell and the fields lay quiet. In the slave huts, survivors whispered. They say Tacky walked through fire. They say he could not be killed by steel. They say Amma sings still, her lullaby echoing in the rivers. A boy clutched a broken flute, Kojo's flute, and whispered, they laughed even when they bled. An old woman spat into the dust. Chains bind us, yes, but chains remember too. One by one, the rebels were dragged to the gallows. The square smelled of sweat, piss, and fear. Kojo was brought first, his hands bound, his shirt soaked with blood from old wounds. He looked at the rope, then at the crowd. His smile was faint but steady. Our chains, he said, voice carrying clear, will outlast your rope. The platform dropped. His body swung, but his words clung heavier than the air. Mensa's hammer was displayed beside his corpse, nailed to the gallows as a warning. Grace was tied to a post, flogged until her skin hung in strips, then burned. She did not scream after the first lash. Nana Abena was bound, her gourd of ashes smashed at her feet. The soldiers laughed as the wind carried the grey dust. She closed her eyes, whispering in her own tongue until the flames silenced her. Tacky was hunted for days through cane and thicket. The militia pressed harder, driven by Wallace's guidance. At last, cornered near the coast, he stood tall, charm still at his side, though torn and blackened. A musket ball struck him square in the chest. He staggered, coughed, but his eyes never lowered. The soldiers cut off his head and fixed it to a pike at the roadside. Children were dragged there by their masters to see. This is what happens, overseers said. This is your warning. But the children looked longer than the overseers intended. Some saw not a warning but a beacon. Amma vanished in the chaos. Some said she drowned, swept into the river with flames on her heels. Others swore she fled into the mountains, her pendant glinting in the moonlight, her voice carrying still. And when children in the huts could not sleep, their mothers hummed a lullaby, soft, sweet, impossible to silence. Far across the sea in England, Mary Ellen unfolded her bundle of letters. She read them aloud in secret gatherings, accounts of fire, blood, and voices that refused to die quietly. They will call it rebellion, she told her listeners. But listen closer, it was memory breaking free of chains. Her words traveled further than the ships of sugar. They sowed unease in drawing rooms, questions in chapels, anger in taverns. By the month's end, order was restored. Fields burned black had been replanted. Overseers barked once more, but something had shifted. The widows wept, the governor decreed. The slaves whispered, and in the soil of Jamaica, under cane and ash a memory remained, red as fire, heavy as chains. The smoke cleared. The fields greened again. Ships returned to their ports. To the governors and planters, the rebellion was finished. To the enslaved, it had only begun. In the cane rows, under the sun's whip, voices rose in song. At first soft, no louder than the clink of chains. Tacky, tacky, red feather flame. He broke the locks, he burned the cane. Overseers shouted, struck, demanded silence. But the song slipped between stalks, carried in breath, murmured over grinding mills. Chains rattled in rhythm. Machetes flashed in memory. In the mission houses, preachers thundered from their pulpits. He was a demon clothed in flesh. He led innocents astray. His fire was Satan's fire. Their daughters bowed their heads, their hands folded. Yet some, like Mary Ellen, remembered smoke curling from the great house, and the way her own knees had shaken when Amma's lullaby drifted across the night. She wrote again, "If this was Satan's fire, then perhaps heaven has grown too quiet." Across the island, whispers thickened. They cut off his head, but still he walks. On nights when the cane burns, you can see him, red feather at his waist, machete dripping sugar and blood. Children dared one another to wander to the roadside where his skull had rotted on a pike. They swore they heard drums beneath the soil, steady as a hidden heart. In the diaspora, carried on slave ships to other islands, to Carolina, to Brazil. His story traveled like contraband. He was a prince once, the people said. He led us like a chief. He did not beg. He did not run. In the darkness of shipholds, chained wrists tapped rhythms, recreating his march. Women hummed Amma's lullaby into their children's ears. A lullaby that no overseer could truly silence. A planter's journal, written in trembling ink, captured the fear. They speak his name as if it were prayer. They hum his songs. When the cane rustles, I think I hear it too. God save us if memory itself cannot be whipped, generations past. His name was no longer just a man's. It was an omen, a warning, a hope. In some villages, mothers told their children, "Do not play with fire or Taki will come." In others, they said, "Hold fast to fire, Taki will come." Chains, fire, blood, lullabies. These were the language of memory. The narrator's voice fell soft, like ash drifting on water. When the sugar dissolved in teacups across Europe, it carried the taste of rebellion. Sweet on the tongue, bitter in the blood. Taki's story was not erased. It was stirred, sipped, swallowed. And somewhere, in the hum of voices laboring still, it lived. What is rebellion but memory refusing to stay buried? Taki's name was not forged only in blood, but in remembrance of a father beaten to death, of a lullaby sung across oceans, of laughter that dared survive chains. The rebellion was fire, but fire kindled by memory. And what is cruelty, if not forgetting? Forgetting that the boy who stole bread had once been a child, that the woman who sang in the fields once sang in freedom, that the man cut down in the cane once wore a crown. Oppression thrives on amnesia. It demands silence, erasure, the bleaching of blood from ledgers, but memory resists. Chains may rattle, but they also record. Each clink a tally, each scar a testimony. And fire, though smothered, waits in the embers. Justice, then, is not only trial and punishment. It is the refusal to forget. It is the act of telling and retelling, of making sure the chains are heard. The fire seen, the lullabies remembered. For what the overseers called savagery, others called defiance. What the governor called inconvenience, the enslaved called deliverance. History itself stands between those voices trembling, so we must ask, whose memory do we honor? The ledgers of Pontefort inked in sugar and blood, or the whispers in the fields sung soft and steady? He did not beg. He did not run. Chains may bind, but fire frees. Memory carried forward is the truest rebellion of all. If you were chained, if you were silenced, if your children were stolen from your arms, what would you do? Would you bow your head, pray for mercy, hope that time itself might soften the whip? Or would you sharpen the blade, whisper the song, and wait for the night when fire answers back? Taki did not beg. He did not run. He stood in the smoke of burning cane and chose to rise, knowing the price would be his blood, his name, his very head on a pike. And yet his story lives. His rebellion survives not in ledgers or decrees, but in memory, in whispers, in fire that refuses to die. So I ask you, in his place, what would you do? Would you forgive, or would you burn it all down? If this story unsettled you, if it lit even the faintest spark of remembrance, then carry it forward. Share it, keep the fire alive. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and tell others that history is more than names in books. It is voices, chained and unchained, still demanding to be heard. Because some stories are not meant to fade. They are meant to burn,